Hey everybody, it's Norm from Tested, and today I'm going to be reviewing and going over the build process of this guy right here, what I'm sitting in, which is a racing and flight simulator cockpit. This is something that I've wanted to put together and have in my home office for the longest time, and we basically have all the technology to have an arcade in your home, between gaming computers, your HOTAS, your hands-on throttle and stick, your force feedback racing wheel, and of course VR headsets. You can bring that experience of flying an airplane, of being in the seat of a Formula race car, bring that to an elevated level with the ergonomics of a cockpit seat. So this is the Next Level Racing FGT. It's kind of their middle of the road journeyman cockpit. There's a light version that's a little more portable. I wanted something a little more sturdy. I have all these accessories mounted to it, including the Buttkicker tactile transducer, the base shaker that I tested. I really love using, and this is actually made to work with that. And this isn't a full motion simulator, so there's no multi-axis forward feedback and movement. It's a static seat, but ergonomically, it helps me feel like I am in the cockpit of a spaceship, in the driver's seat of a race car, and it really adds to the immersion, especially with a VR headset, of those simulators and arcade games. So let's flash back to the beginning of this month where I put this together and talk over and go over that build process before we talk about how it's performed. Okay, today begins my assembly of this Next Level FGT simulator cockpit. I have all the parts unboxed already and laid out, knolled out here on this rug because this is where I'm going to be assembling it and basically playing. Right now in my office, I have my SteamVR Lighthouse beacons in the corners of the room. So right here, I'm going to have visibility, line of sight to my VR headset, and it also is relatively close to my gaming PC, so everything can be connected there in terms of the headset, in terms of running the games off of that PC, and also the accessories for my wheel and also flight sticks. I also have a laptop just in case I want to run it off of that. The whole thing is basically going to end up being about 24 inches wide, and so give myself a couple extra inches of clearance. So basically 28 inches is what I want room for. So if I have it installed and set up here, I'm still going to have space for example, I'll open my shelves. There are two different configurations to set up this cockpit. There's a formula orientation where the seat's lower, you're a little more stretched out, or the GT orientation, which is what I'm going to go with. The seat's higher, which also lets me mount the posts for the Buttkicker transducer, because this is made to work with that as well. The assembly is going to basically be in two halves. First, there's the frame that gets set up and connected, basically for either orientation. And then there's also the seat, of course, that gets set up. Those two get put together. And then, of course, you can adjust the wheel plate and the pedal plates for however you want to have it set up. I also have the Combat Flight accessory pack, which is going to let me have additional mounting points for flight stick and throttle, because I want to use this not only for racing games, but also, of course, for flight sims and for Star Wars Squadrons coming out. So I'm really excited, and let's get started building. So I have all the hardware here, a bunch of M8 bolts, nuts, and washers. They say don't use power tools, just hand tighten everything so you don't risk stripping any of these. And I guess it's time for assembly. So while you're watching me put this together, let me fill in some details about this kit. I had already unboxed everything, but it does come double box in a pretty sturdy packaging. And it's a pretty heavy kit. It's about 100 pounds. Now, I did assemble this by myself, but it would have been really easier with two people. That's not to say that it can't be done with one person, but two I think would be recommended. The packaging gives you way more bolts, nuts, and washers than you need, but the clamshell packaging, where all the hardware is included, falls apart pretty easily, so I recommend sorting it all into some bins beforehand. That's something I wish I did. Like I mentioned, there are two positions for this seat, and one of the big selling points is that you can switch between the reclined formula position to the upright GT position, and in between 15 minutes to half an hour. Only the GT position allows for the Buttkicker base shaker mount underneath the seat, so that's what I went with. But I also elevated the pedals for what they call a hybrid position. That was better for my own height and ergonomic comfort. For putting the seat together, you connect the base to a frame and then the back via these two adjustable angle brackets with 6 bolts on each side. And this is the only place where you have a bolt with a built-in adjustment knob to change the angle without bringing out the hex key again, which is pretty easy. And I tried different angles, but the upright seat position just ended up being by far the best position for the GT arrangement. The seat, the wheel deck, and the pedal plate are all on rails, so you can loosen the bolts and slide them, and especially the wheel deck is something you'll want to slide both the height, which is at an angle, as well as the distance away from where your hands are and your arms are, but every adjustment requires loosening and tightening a bunch of different bolts, so I don't see this as something you're going to be adjusting on the fly for different users or friends who come over and try it out. You basically find the position that you like and then keep it there. Without the flight stick mounts mounted on the left and right side, the footprint of this ended up being about 5 feet by 2.5 feet in this GT position, and the seat is about 4 feet tall off the ground. And overall, the assembly took me about an hour and a half to put together. Okay, I have put together the Next Level FGT simulation, racing, spaceship, cockpit. The whole process, not too difficult, just took a little bit of time. Of course, having your own set of Allen keys, much better than the ones that come with it, but the ones that come with it will suffice. Just might take a little more elbow grease. Haven't tightened everything yet, but I did want to just get into the seat to see how it feels. And yeah, all right. I can imagine myself shooting down some TIE fighters in this. A lot of configuration options. I have this in the, of course, the GT orientation, so elevated. I still have to attach a bunch of accessories, but things that I need to configure are, for example, the pedal plate, how far it is away from my feet, the angle here, that's all adjustable. Same with the wheel plate here. That angle, I'm having it right now, you know, obviously just parallel to the ground, but this bar can be raised and lowered depending on how I want to hold a wheel. I still need to attach the accessories for my flight sticks and throttle. And then I can, of course, adjust the angle here. Lumbar support, highly recommended for this configuration, but it's feeling pretty good. I'm excited. So I have my wheel, my flight stick, the transducer, as well as other accessories to deck this out with, and that's gonna be our next step. But first, I'm sweating up a storm, so I'm gonna change the t-shirt. I'll be right back. Alrighty, time for a check-in, and I have to confess, a little bit of time has passed since we checked in last with this build. It's one of these projects where I really want to get ahead of myself because I want to get to a point where I can make use of this, and in this case, I really wanted to get in a game. So I did get ahead of myself and I went ahead and installed the Combat Flight Pack. That's these two plates here, along with these arms that mount onto the side rails of the seat. Now the FGT here does include a small arm and a small plate for a gear shifter, and I considered using that for my throttle or my stick, but it was a little too small and it actually doesn't stick out. And so these do stick out, and ergonomically, I've got them in a pretty comfortable position. This is one of those things where I want the throttle and stick actually to be close to me because I don't want to be stretching out my arms as I'm playing, because ergonomically that's a little bit taxing. So I want to be in a nice resting neutral position. And what I found is, one, it does expand the width of this whole setup. So it's a lot more than that 26 to 28 inches that I had built in, but I still think I have enough clearance in my space to make use of this. And while there are a bunch of adjustments you can make, like I mentioned, the seat can be adjusted and you can move these plates and the angles of this. For the Combat Flight Pack, there's only so much you can dial in. You can only kind of adjust it forward or backward, bolt it in. There's no kind of twisting of these plates or moving it up and down. It's not on a hinge system, basically. It's one of the things I kind of wish that was possible. Like a kind of like a magic arm that you'd see on a camera setup where I could loosen it up, get it to a right spot, and then lock it down. That's just not possible here. Now, in terms of locking down this flight stick and throttle, I'm not going to be bolting them in because they're relatively lightweight, and I may still want to fiddle with their placement. And so I'm actually be using some 3M low profile dual lock. This is basically their version of high strength Velcro. And a lot of people who've built their own flight simulators have recommended using basically low profile Velcro for some not permanent attachment of their HOTAS setup. You could also use something like butyl, that's like that tacky putty that you would use to attach like a GoPro to your car dashboard, or it's basically stronger than that like earthquake putty you use to affix things to a shelf. But low profile Velcro will work, or you could just bolt it on if you want. The holes are all there, plenty of holes on these plates for that to work. And I do have a laptop here for easy accessibility for getting my games launched. I got my touch controllers and a Rift S headset that I have plugged in just to do some testing on this. And I did actually also screw in that Buttkicker bass shaker, and playing a game like Elite Dangerous with my Cytec X52 Pros in VR in this chair has been awesome so far. I mean, I think I spent an hour and a half just playing some arena battles, even going through some of the old tutorial missions just to reacquaint myself with the game, and it's really exciting. So next up, I'm gonna install the wheel and the pedals, and for that I've chosen a Thrustmaster T300 wheel, and this I will be bolting on because this is pretty heavy and it needs to be secure, has force feedback, and so that's our next step. So let's get to bolting that on. So we're now back to the present, and after a couple weeks of having this in my office and using it, first of all, I have to acknowledge it takes up a big amount of space. The footprint here is pretty substantial, and while I had measured it out and given myself a bunch of accommodation, about 2 feet, it ends up being wider than that because of where the flight sticks are mounted. They stick out quite a bit, and so it's a bit of an investment in space. This is not a model that collapses and stows away in a closet. I chose the sturdier one because I wanted the mount for the base shaker, and I don't have regrets there, but it is something to consider if you're going to be building your own flight seat and racing seat kit like this one. But in terms of the amount of immersion and how much it brings to those games, it is such an improvement. I mean, yes, I was already having a lot of fun in VR playing racing games wearing a headset and using the base shaker, but having the flight sticks mounted in a great spot, having the wheel secure here and not wobbly and not worried about it coming loose and damaging or being precariously mounted to my desk or my computer, having that dedicated space really helps. Ergonomically, while it does take a lot of space, it does also feel very compact. Everything is very accessible, and I also found that for the flight sticks, I actually want to move the seat up as close as possible so that my hands are in a nice resting position. Otherwise, I do have to extend them a little bit far. I completely acknowledge this is one of those things, it's complete luxury, it's unnecessary, not essential for a gaming setup. And if you're looking for things to augment your flight sim gaming experience, like get a flight stick first of all, get a racing wheel if you're going to be playing racing games, and then after that, get a VR headset, because those things combined, I think, make up 80% of the experience. That base shaker, I think, also really adds to the immersion because this isn't a motion simulator, and just a little bit of haptic feedback tied to the low end of the sound of the games. The rumble flying through a spaceship when blowing up a ship in Elite Dangerous and feeling it rattle here, that just makes it feel like I'm in an arcade, and it's that nice balance of getting extra immersion without having to have a full motion simulator built out, which would take even more space. So I have no regrets about setting this one up. It doesn't include casters, and that is something that I will look to add to this model, and all of this is kind of leading up to the culmination of playing Star Wars Squadrons, and so I'll be reviewing that using this setup, using a VR headset. I have the Rift S plugged in this right now, and yes, I had this set up where it's going to be in view of my Steam VR base stations, but I find the convenience of having a single cable, whether for the Rift S or something like the Quest 2 with the link cable, that convenience of having it plugged to my laptop, I think, just makes it easier to set this up and get in here. I have my desktop a couple feet away, but having to have the USB cables routed to that, plus the audio cable for the base shaker, and of course the HDMI cable, DisplayPort cables for the VR headsets. That's just an extra step that, while I've tried it a couple times, I'm defaulting to my gaming laptop for now. But I'd love to know what your experience has been like if you've put together your own racing seat or a flight seat, a cockpit for simulators, or if you've put together a kit like this one. What are your tips for making it work for you? Please post in the comments below, but I'll be back next time with more coverage of games and gear that make use of this setup I have now. Thanks for joining me on this journey, and I'll see you next time. Bye.